The voice on the tape was calm, almost reverent. "Trail rules are not suggestions," the ranger said. "They're survival guidelines written by the dead." The recording crackled. A pen scratched faintly against paper. Then a sigh. "Every sign nailed to a tree, every rule printed on a brochure, someone broke it once. That's why it exists. Don't think of it as a warning. Think of it as a gravestone." The tape clicked, and the forest filled the silence. Whined through needles, the long groan of a branch bending under weight. Somewhere far off, the steady drone of a river working through rock. Fog creeps low across the pines of Olympic National Park, soft as breath, pale as old smoke. The trail markers here are half swallowed by moss, their bright paint reduced to bruised streaks of red and white. At dawn, you can hear the crows along the ridges, voices carrying between trees that have stood longer than the country that claimed them. If you linger long enough, you'll find the signs the tourists miss: half-fallen stay-on-marked trail boards, or old wooden posts cut off mid-word, tilted toward the soil like they're giving up. There's one, out near Hoh Rainforest, that still bears the faint black lettering from decades ago. "Beware. Trail closed after sunset." Someone added a new line in permanent marker underneath. Not a suggestion. Most rescues begin the same way. They just wanted a better view. That's what families say when they call. That's what friends tell the rangers at the station while clutching coffee cups they won't drink. They just wanted a better view. It's the most human reason in the world to vanish. The mistake doesn't start as arrogance. It starts as trust. Trust that the woods are like the rest of the world, that they follow the same rules of direction and sound, that your GPS will stay faithful, that the sun will set slow enough to give you time to find your way back. The forest waits for that trust. It doesn't fight you for it. It lets you give it away. The National Park Service calls it the 5 rules. Unofficially, rangers call them the 5 warnings. Stay on marked trails. Don't hike alone after dark. Never follow lights in the forest. Don't approach unattended camps. Always tell someone your route. Every one of them exists because someone ignored it. The rules are stitched together from decades of reports, names, dates, small mistakes. Each line in the manual cost a human life. Somewhere in a file cabinet there's a case for each one. The first time I heard the phrase, "written in blood," it came from a ranger named Elliot Ward, a quiet man with 20 years of field duty and the kind of eyes that stayed fixed on horizons long after he came home. We were sitting in a ranger station near Yosemite after a week of heavy storms. The power had gone out, and the emergency lantern painted everything in amber light. Ward leaned against the wall and said, "You know what the problem is with rules? People think they're made to control them. But out here, the rules don't control you. They keep the forest from learning your name." He sipped his coffee. That's the difference between a hiker and a headline. Most people who vanish aren't inexperienced. They're careful, methodical, seasoned. They check the forecast, pack the right gear, mark their routes. They're the ones who think the rules are meant for someone else. The careless ones don't get far enough to disappear. But the confident go deeper. They're the ones who step past the sign because it's just a few more feet, who decide the trail must curve back soon, who think the forest owes them logic. It's never the first step that gets you, it's the second. The one where you realize you've already lost the sound of the trail behind you. Ask any ranger how it feels when the woods go silent. They'll all say the same thing. It's like being watched by something that doesn't have eyes. The birds stop first. Then the wind. Then the sound of your own steps fades, as if the forest decided to hold its breath. That's when you turn around and realize you've been walking in circles. It's not a curse. It's acoustics and topography. The way the land folds in on itself, the way fog absorbs sound, the way your mind tries to fill in the blanks. But it feels personal. And that feeling, more than weather, more than wildlife, is what kills. Every park has its ghosts, but they don't haunt in the traditional sense. They linger through the rules, through stories retold at campfires or written down in the margins of old ranger logs. If you ask about the 5 rules, no one will admit to creating them. They've just always been there, like the trail itself. Each one traced back to a single decision someone made and didn't come back from. Ward used to keep a map on the wall of his station marked with red pins, each one placed where a major rescue or recovery took place. When you stepped back, the pattern looked like arteries spreading through the forest. He called it the park's memory. There's an old saying in search and rescue, the forest doesn't chase you, it waits for you to walk in. That's why the 5 rules matter. They're not about fear, they're about humility. They remind you that no matter how smart, how prepared, or how skilled you are, the wild will always be older and more patient than you. We build roads, name mountains, chart GPS coordinates, and print maps, but the wilderness doesn't read them. It only listens. And sometimes, when you stay too long, it listens back. At the end of each season, rangers write their reports. They log lost hikers, found campsites, incidents a few lines long that sound simple until you read the details. You start seeing the same phrases. Subject left marked trail. Subject reported following a light source. Subject failed to notify a route. Patterns repeat. People vanish the same way, in the same places, making the same decisions. Each report becomes another paragraph in a story no one wants to finish. That's what the ranger meant when he said the rules are written in blood. They're not superstition. They're statistics. So before you hear these 5 survivor accounts, understand this. None of them were reckless thrill seekers. They were careful, experienced, just like you. And that's why their stories matter. Because the forest doesn't test beginners. It tests believers, the ones who think they've already earned its respect. Night falls slow in the wilderness. First the gold, then the gray, then the black, that erases everything but breath and memory. That's when the rules start whispering in your head. Stay on marked trails. Don't hike alone after dark. Never follow lights in the forest. Don't approach unattended camps. Always tell someone your route. 5 rules. 5 boundaries between survival and silence. If you follow them, the forest forgets you. If you don't, it remembers your name. Trail rules are not suggestions. The voice repeats faintly from the tape. They're survival guidelines written by the dead. The recording ends with a soft click. Outside, the forest exhales, branches shifting, leaves brushing against the station's window. Somewhere far down the trail, a sign sways on its rusted nails, creaking as it moves. Its letters are barely visible through the fog, but if you catch the light just right, you can still read them. Stay on marked trail. And beneath it, scratched into the wood with something sharp. Not everyone. WHO leaves comes back. Rule 1. Stay on marked trails. The desert light in Zion changes fast. At noon, it's all gold and distance. By late afternoon, the cliffs start swallowing the sun whole. The canyons fill with violet shadows, and every sound seems to slide into the rock. That's when Evan Porter decided to step off the trail. He was 34, a landscape photographer out of Flagstaff, hiking solo on the Angels Landing access route in late October 2019. He'd been there before, twice for magazine shoots, once for himself. He knew the terrain, he knew the light, and that, rangers would later say, was the problem. According to his permit application, he was supposed to stop at Scout Lookout and head back by 5:30 p.m., But at 5:14, the park cameras caught him hiking past the turn sign and into a wash where the trail splits into several faint side paths. At 5:41, the sun dropped behind Cathedral Mountain. At 6 o'clock, the trail cameras stopped recording. Evan never made it back. The next morning, his rental car was still parked at the trailhead. Inside were 2 bottles of water, a spare battery, and a folded park map still creased from factory print. His tripod was missing, so was his camera. Search and rescue launched at first light. By 10 a.m., a ranger named Megan Holt found boot prints leading west, parallel to the main trail but just beyond the marked path. They followed them for half a mile before the tracks vanished in a patch of loose sand near a dry creek bed. The desert can erase a person fast. At 1 p.m., a drone sweep picked up faint thermal readings on the opposite ridge. The team moved toward it. Nothing. The air shimmered from heat. The signal was gone. By sundown, the canyon floor was quiet again. Too quiet. Evan Porter was found 36 hours later, barefoot and dehydrated, curled beneath an overhang 5 miles from where he'd left the trail. He was conscious but incoherent. He asked for water, then for his tripod, then whispered something the medics couldn't understand. When they tried to lift him onto the stretcher, he resisted, kept pointing back toward the canyon rim, insisting he needed to get it back. "What, Evan?" a ranger asked. He blinked. "The voice," he said. "It's still up there." Later, in the hospital, when he was stable enough to talk, he gave a fragmented account. He said he'd seen a perfect angle of the cliffs just as the sun began to dip, gold light spilling through the stone like molten glass, but the line of sight was wrong from the trail. He only needed a few steps off path to get the composition he wanted. He marked a cairn of small stones near the edge to find his way back. But when he turned around, the cairn was gone. He thought he'd just misjudged the slope, so he kept moving laterally, searching for the marker. The canyon was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy on your skin. Then he heard someone behind him. A voice. Low, calm, saying his name. He said it wasn't an echo. It came from the trees. The trees were sparse out there, but he swore the sound moved between them, always keeping its distance, always pacing him. At one point, he turned back toward the main trail. He thought he saw a light, maybe another hiker's headlamp. He shouted, "Hey!" The light blinked twice. Then it moved sideways, behind the rocks. He followed. That's the part of the story where every ranger nods the same way. Because they've heard it before. Once you step off the path, the landscape shifts its logic. The ground stops matching the map. The canyon walls reflect sound in strange ways. One shout becomes 5, each from a different direction. Even your sense of distance fails you. A ridge that looks 2 minutes away might take 20. That's how people walk in circles in open country. It's not the land playing tricks. It's your brain. It starts filling in patterns that aren't there. That's what we call topographic dissonance, when your perception and the terrain disagree and you start trusting the wrong one. By his own account, Evan hiked for hours that night without realizing it. He tried marking trees with chalk, but the marks kept fading in the dark. He thought he was moving toward the trailhead, but the slope kept changing beneath his feet. At some point, he said, he heard the voice again. "Almost there," it told him. "Just keep walking." He said it sounded friendly, familiar even, like someone who already knew where he was going. He asked the medics later if one of them had followed him that night, maybe calling to keep him calm. They said no one was within 5 miles of his position until the second morning. They didn't tell him about the footage yet. At 3:11 a.m. on the second night, one of the SAR body cams captured something strange. The team had set up temporary camp near the lower ravine. Wind speed was low, temperature 42 degrees Fahrenheit. In the recording, the ranger's headlamp moves over the tent wall. You can hear the static of the radio, the crunch of boots. Then something else. Soft, rhythmic, like someone breathing close to the mic. At first, it seems like it's just the ranger shifting in the dark. But the breathing doesn't match his movements. When he stops, it continues. Then, faintly, you hear a whisper. A man's voice. Almost there. When they reviewed the footage later, the timestamp showed the recording happened just minutes after the thermal drone registered a moving heat signature near camp. Nothing was visible on the camera. But the audio spike was real. They logged it as unidentified ambient interference. Officially, that's where the report ends. Unofficially, one of the rescuers said the whisper sounded just like Evan's voice. When Evan was well enough to walk, the rangers took him back to the site where they found him. He didn't want to go at first, but he agreed. He said he needed closure. He retraced his steps as best he could, trying to remember where he'd turned, where he'd seen the light. Half a mile in, he stopped. He pointed toward the canyon wall. "That's it," he said. "That's where I came through." Except there was no opening. Just smooth sandstone. He pressed his palm against it, looked confused. "I walked through here," he whispered. "It opened." He looked at the ranger, searching her face for confirmation, like maybe she'd seen it too. All she could say was, "There's no trail here, Evan." He nodded slowly. "I know," he said. "That's the problem." The rangers found his camera 2 weeks later. It was upright, half buried in sand, less than a mile from his recovery site. The lens was cracked, but the memory card was intact. Most of the footage was typical. Time-lapses of canyon walls, slow pans of the horizon. Then, at 5:45 p.m. on the night he vanished, there's a final clip. The camera is aimed at the sunset. Evan's voice is audible, saying, "Perfect, just need to step left." He adjusts the tripod, walks off frame. For about 10 seconds, the shot is still, empty landscape, wind moving dust. Then, from the left edge of the frame, another figure moves through the light. It's shaped like him. Same backpack, same jacket, but it's walking the wrong direction, toward the canyon rim. The clip ends abruptly, like someone covered the lens with a hand. When the footage was shown to Evan later, he grew pale. "That's not me," he said. He stared at the screen for a long time, then added quietly, "But I remember following him." The report lists his physical injuries as mild dehydration, blistering and frostbite on both feet from walking barefoot. When asked about the missing boots, Evan said he took them off because they didn't feel right anymore. When pressed to explain, he said, quote, "They were too heavy." Saar never recovered them. The final line of his ranger report reads, Subject stated, "It kept telling me I was almost there, but I never said where I was going." When you leave a marked trail, you enter terrain designed to confuse you. Canyons reflect light and sound in ways that distort both direction and distance. If you shout, your echo might return from behind you. If you see light, it may be miles away, or only 10 feet, reflected from stone. And once the terrain starts repeating itself, your sense of memory betrays you. Every branch looks familiar, every rock feels known. You think you're finding your way back when you're only walking in loops. That's why rangers say, "Stay found." Because if the forest or the desert loses track of you, it's not malicious. It just won't remember how to find you again. When Evan finally returned to the trailhead weeks later, he left a note under the warning sign for others who might wander off as he did. It was written in black marker faded by the sun. If you hear someone calling, keep walking, but not toward them. Below it, someone else, another hiker, had added a single line. Almost there. Rule 2. Never follow lights in the forest. The Great Smoky Mountains breathe in color. Even after sundown, the ridges hold on to the light. Blue haze, pale gold, then the deep green that turns black when the mist rises. That's what the hikers always forget. The forest doesn't go dark all at once. It lingers. And sometimes, something lingers with it. They were two campers, Noah Weaver and Caleb Briggs, both 26, best friends since college. They'd been hiking together for years. Utah, Colorado, Yosemite, but this was their first time in the Smokies. Late May 2021. Mild temperatures. Early firefly season. They'd set up camp near Klingman's Dome, a clearing that overlooked a shallow valley dense with laurel and hemlock. Their final text exchange with family read, "Signal low but safe. Camping near ridge. Perfect night for time-lapse. See you Sunday." They didn't know that only one of them would come back. Ranger reports reconstruct the timeline from a mixture of recovered audio, GPS logs, and Noah's testimony. At 9:13 p.m., Caleb recorded his last photo, a long exposure of the valley, faint starlight over fog. At 9:22, the camera picks up a faint glow near the bottom of the frame, 2 points of warm light, close together, hovering just above the tree line. At 9:25, the first voice recording begins. Recording, 0 hours, 0 minutes and 3 seconds. Wind through branches, crickets. Noah, that's gotta be a campsite, right? Caleb, maybe a ranger outpost? Pause. Noah, they're moving. Caleb, no, it's the fog, light refraction. Noah, fog doesn't move uphill. Static. Then the faint crunch of boots on soil. When search and rescue found the phone days later, the footage showed Caleb walking downhill with his flashlight pointed at the ridge, Noah behind him. The lights flickered again, pale and rhythmic, like lanterns swaying from unseen hands. "They looked deliberate," Noah said later, "not random like fireflies. They moved together, like they were waiting for us to follow." At first, he thought it was other campers, maybe using headlamps, but the motion wasn't right. The lights didn't shake the way a person's flashlight would. They glided. He said they always stayed just far enough to remain out of reach. By 9:40 p.m., the two reached a narrow drop-off, maybe 20 feet deep. The light stopped beyond it, hovering at the opposite edge. Caleb laughed. "That's weirdly beautiful," he said. Then his voice changed. "Wait, are they coming closer?" In the recording, Noah's breathing quickens. He says something muffled, something about turning back. Caleb insists on crossing. You can hear the shift in gravel as he searches for footing. Then, "Caleb, someone's over there. I hear them talking." Noah, "Caleb, no, listen. That's not." Caleb, "They said my name." The clip ends there. Noah said the sound wasn't an echo. He heard Caleb's name, clear as daylight, coming from across the gap in a voice that almost, but not quite, sounded human. "It wasn't calling," he said. "It was answering." He shouted for Caleb to stop, but by then the lights were already moving deeper into the trees, and Caleb was following. When Noah tried to chase, the fog rolled in fast, like something exhaled by the forest itself. He could barely see his hands in front of his face. He said he shouted until his throat hurt, then followed the trail back uphill by compass. He made it to camp around 1 a.m. and stayed awake until dawn, listening for footsteps that never came. Search teams began at sunrise. The area was steep, full of ravines and switchbacks. Easy to lose your sense of direction, especially at night. They found signs of movement halfway down the valley, 2 sets of prints leading downhill, then only 1 set continuing onward. The second pair stopped suddenly in a patch of soft moss, no drag marks, no signs of a fall. Just gone. At 6:47 a.m., Noah used the emergency beacon. SAR located him within 2 hours. Disoriented, shaking, eyes bloodshot. He kept asking the same question over and over. Where's the light now? When the team brought him back to the station, he refused to close his eyes during the debrief. Ranger Tanya Reed, who conducted the interview, noted in her report, "Subject displays acute night anxiety, states the light spoke in familiar voices, describes auditory distortion and mirroring behavior, i.e., the lights moved when he moved, stopped when he stopped." He told her, "They didn't want us to find them. They wanted us to follow." It took another 2 days to find Caleb's pack. It was upright, leaning against a fallen tree, straps buckled, flashlight on but battery dead. The compass inside was still functional, but its needle spun constantly, never settling. No footprints beyond that point. Sayar dogs followed scent for 50 more yards before losing it completely. What stopped them wasn't terrain, it was fear. They froze, whining, refusing to go forward. Caleb's body was found 6 days later, 2 miles east of the original campsite, in a hollow bordered by thick rhododendrons. His boots were missing. So were his socks. His phone was waterlogged, found face down in mud. When technicians recovered the data, only one recording was intact. It was short, less than 10 seconds. Low static, faint breath. Voice, this way. Pause. Caleb, okay. Then silence. Educational pause, narrator segment. The Smoky Mountains have always been a theater for light. Photographers call it the blue illusion, the way moisture, pollen, and light scatter in the air to create shifting colors and depth. But sometimes, natural light phenomena blend with human perception in ways science can't quite cleanly separate. The most common explanation for mysterious wandering lights is bioluminescence, a natural glow produced by decaying matter, minerals, or insects. Then there's phosphine gas, formed by decomposing organic material, which can combust in humid air, creating small, spontaneous flames. Or retinal afterimages, when the human eye, strained by darkness and fatigue, begins projecting its own ghosts of color into the landscape. All of these can explain the occasional flicker, the glint on the edge of vision, but not what happens when the light moves with purpose. The Park Service ran a frequency analysis on Caleb's recovered audio, comparing it to environmental recordings from the same region. Normal environmental sounds fall within predictable decibel and frequency ranges: wind, insects, water flow. The voice on Caleb's tape registered an oscillation pattern identical to human breathing. Except it wasn't breath. It was light interference recorded through the microphone sensor. The waveform wasn't just visible, it inhaled. One ranger said later that the tape reminded her of a lantern flame, brightening and dimming in rhythm with something unseen. She turned off the playback midway through. "It felt wrong," she said, "like the sound was waiting for me to answer." That clip never made it into public records. Instead, the official file closes with the phrase, "Audio anomaly consistent with environmental distortion. Case unresolved." In Smoky Mountain folklore, these lights have other names: the Brown Mountain Ghosts, the Witch Fire, the Lantern Man. Stories that date back hundreds of years, before electricity, before cameras, before maps, describe travelers being led off paths by glowing orbs. Some stories end with the light disappearing at a cliff's edge. Others claim the lights follow the survivors home, hovering outside windows until dawn. The oldest Cherokee accounts refer to them as Asgina Dihi, the one who shows the path but has none of his own. Rangers still log modern reports under the same field tag, VLP, Visual Light Phenomenon. Unofficially, they call them last lights, because they're the last thing most missing hikers ever see. Noah eventually left Tennessee. He moved to Oregon, stopped camping altogether. But before he left, he visited the ridge one final time with Ranger Reed. He stood where their camp had been, looking out across the valley as fog rolled in. "You ever wonder," he asked, "why they look like lanterns?" Reed didn't answer. "Lanterns mean people," he said quietly. "They make you feel safe, like there's a road ahead." He turned to her then, face pale in the morning light. "But roads don't float in the air, do they?" At the ranger station, there's a quote carved into the edge of the wooden conference table. No one claims to have written it, but everyone leaves it there. If it's moving like it's waiting for you, it's not lost. They call it the second rule. Rule 3, don't hike alone after dark. Olympic National Park breathes differently after dark. During the day, it's all moss and mist, dripping branches and sunlight like spilled gold through the canopy. But once the sun slides behind the ridgelines, the forest changes its lungs. The air thickens. The birds stop. And the silence becomes something alive. That's what Eli Morgan remembered most about the night he was alone, how the forest seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for him to speak first. It started as a simple weekend trip. 4 friends, Eli, Marissa, Troy, and Hannah, all in their late 20s, all outdoor hobbyists from Seattle. They'd chosen the Hoh River Trail for its dense beauty and easy elevation. It was mid-September 2018. Weather forecast: clear skies, mild wind, sunset at 7:33 p.m. They planned to make camp at 5 Mile Island before dusk. But they didn't make it that far. According to ranger logs, the group left the visitor center at 2:12 p.m. By 5 o'clock, tensions had started. Marissa wanted to keep pushing deeper into the forest. Troy wanted to stop early. Eli, the self-appointed navigator, insisted they were on pace, while Hannah said they'd already passed their intended waypoint. Voices got louder. The sun got lower. At 5:27, they split. Eli took the main trail north to verify their position. The others waited behind, planning to camp if he didn't return within an hour. They'd been a group all day, laughing, filming, trading snacks. But that single decision turned them into statistics. The GoPro recovered from Eli's pack tells the story in real time. Recording timestamp 1742. Boots crunching, steady breathing. Eli, "I'll prove it. The river bends right up here. You'll see." They'll see. Camera pans across trees, faint light between trunks. This'll take 10 minutes tops. He's confident at first, narrating like an amateur vlogger. He points the camera toward the tree line, toward the glint of the Hoh River cutting through fog. Then the trail begins to darken. By 6:05, the footage shows him switching to flashlight mode. By 6:15, visibility drops to near zero. Eli, "Okay, maybe not 10 minutes, laughs weakly. "Should have brought the whistle. Whatever, I'll loop back." When they found the camera later, it contained 47 minutes of footage. The last 10 are what the rangers still talk about. At 6:32, there's movement in the tree line. Not animals. Not wind. Something flickers between the branches, just out of range of the beam, reflections that seem to respond to his light, like eyes or small mirrors catching it and throwing it back. He stops walking. Eli, "Hey, Marissa, Troy." No response, only the river. Then, faintly, 2 voices. Marissa, distant. Eli, "This way." Troy, overlapping. "Come on, man." Relief floods his tone. Eli, "Finally, I told you I wasn't lost." He starts moving toward the sound. The footage shakes as he quickens his pace. Then, a few seconds later, Hannah, very close. Eli, "Stop." He freezes. Swings the camera in a full circle. Eli, "Hannah, where?" There's no one there. The voice repeats, quieter now, "Stop." Then laughter, 3 voices, layered but uneven. All familiar, all wrong. The camera tilts, catching a blur of motion between the trees, something shaped like a person but moving wrong, gliding rather than stepping. Static fills the audio. Eli, whispering, "That's not you." The camera drops. The last thing visible is the beam of his flashlight cutting across the moss before the feed goes black. Search and rescue found him 14 hours later, barefoot, clothes torn, standing in the middle of the trail 2 miles south of camp. He was shivering violently, skin gray from exposure. When they tried to approach, he stepped back and said, "Don't. You're not them." It took 3 rangers to coax him back to the station. In the log, the first responder wrote, "Subject repeated team members, names in echo pattern inconsistent with distance." When asked what that meant, the ranger explained that Eli kept saying their names, but he wasn't calling out. He was echoing them, as though repeating something he'd just heard whispered back to him. After he stabilized, Eli told the investigators he'd followed the voices through the dark for what felt like hours. He said they always stayed just out of sight, laughing, calling his name, teasing him the same way his friends would. At one point, he shouted for them to wait. The laughter stopped instantly. Then, the same 3 voices, now calm and flat, said in perfect unison, "We're right behind you." He turned. No one was there. The human brain wasn't built for silence. When we're cut off from light, from companionship, from orientation, it begins to invent noise to fill the void. Psychologists call it auditory mirage, the mind's attempt to reconstruct a social environment when none exists. It happens in deserts, at sea, in polar regions, and in forests dense enough to swallow sound. Your brain knows you're supposed to hear something, so it provides it. Add fear, isolation, and darkness, and those projections can become as real as anything you've ever heard. But that doesn't explain what happens when more than one person hears the same thing. That's when the reports start shifting from psychology to something else. By sunrise, Eli's friends had already flagged down a ranger patrol after realizing he hadn't returned. Marissa said she'd been calling for him periodically through the night, using a whistle and shouting his name every hour. Troy and Hannah confirmed. But the timestamps on their calls don't match the times Eli recorded hearing them. He'd been responding to echoes that came before they ever shouted. Ranger Reed, same investigator from the last light case, reviewed the discrepancies. In her summary, she wrote, "Temporal inversion suspected. Subject responded to auditory events not yet produced by search team. Possible audio bounce across valley. Possible cognitive dissociation." But then she added something more personal in the margin. Voices too clear, distance irregular, cadence off. When the GoPro footage was analyzed, technicians found overlapping frequencies, 3 distinct vocal profiles within 1 second of audio. 2 matched the voices of Marissa and Troy. The third matched Eli's own. Except in the recording, his voice wasn't speaking, it was laughing. Eli eventually described the moment he realized he wasn't following his friends. He said the forest began to loop. That the same fallen log appeared 3 different times, though he'd walked in a straight line. That the air felt like it was vibrating. Then, finally, he saw light ahead, the glow of what he thought was a campfire. He rushed toward it, yelling their names. But when he reached the clearing, there was nothing there. No fire, no people. Just 4 footprints, his own. SAR logs show that Eli was found less than half a mile from his original route, in terrain that should have been impossible to traverse barefoot. No injuries to his feet. No cuts. Just dirt. When asked why he'd taken off his boots, he said they were too loud. That something in the dark was listening for leather. He said he took them off to move quietly, so it wouldn't find him again. Dr. Helena Park, wilderness survival psychologist, reviewed the footage later. She said, "This isn't unusual in isolation trauma. The brain defaults to familiar sounds, friends, family, laughter. It's self-preservation, not superstition." But when asked about the synchronized audio, she hesitated. "Mirages don't laugh back," she said. "They fade. They don't imitate." Rangers updated the official policy that winter. All multi-person backcountry permits in Olympic now include group integrity clause. If one member separates after dusk, all members must return to the nearest ranger outpost within 1 hour. Failure to comply results in citation or disqualification for future permits. The memo's reasoning is clinical. Prevent psychological dissociation due to acoustic parallax in dense vegetation. Unofficially, the rangers phrase it differently. Don't split the group, because the forest learns your names faster when you're alone. Eli recovered physically, but he never returned to the park. He told interviewers, quote, "The scariest part wasn't that I heard them, it's that they answered." He meant it literally. He said that somewhere in the middle of the night he started calling his own name into the darkness, trying to orient himself by the echo. It worked. Too well. Because the echo came back. And it said his name differently than he did. Slower, like it was testing the shape of the sound. 3 months after the incident, a park volunteer clearing debris along the same section of trail found a laminated map pinned to a tree trunk. On it, someone had drawn a circle in red marker and written, "Don't answer if you hear yourself." Rangers logged it as a vandalized safety sign and removed it. That night, the same ranger reported hearing laughter while closing the trail gate. 3 overlapping voices, faint, carried by the wind. He filed no report. The human mind is built for connection, but out here connection can kill you. That's why rangers say the third rule isn't superstition, it's survival. Don't split the group. Don't walk alone after dark. Because when you're alone long enough, the forest starts filling the silence with what you miss most. And sometimes, it gets your voice right. So, if you hear your friends laughing behind you but you know they're ahead, keep walking. They'll catch up. And if they don't, you don't turn around. Survival lessons. The ranger found her sitting on a riverbank at dawn. Barefoot, mud up to her knees. Eyes wide and glassy, fixed on the horizon where the Alaskan wilderness was just beginning to exhale its morning fog. When he called out, she didn't answer. She just turned her head, slow, careful, and whispered. Every sound wanted an answer. I stopped giving them. Her name was Claire Donovan, 39 years old, a solo backcountry hiker from Anchorage. She'd been missing for 6 days. According to her itinerary, she'd planned a 4-day trek through Wrangell Street, Elias National Park, tracing a loop that crossed 5 marked routes before ending near a ranger station on the Copper River. She broke every one of the 5 rules. And she lived. But only barely. 1. Stay on marked trails. Claire's journal was found inside a waterproof pouch near her tent. The first few pages read like any hiker's log, notes about weather, gear checks, wildlife sightings. Then the tone changes. Trail faded past mile marker 14, thought it reconnected east, followed ridge for better view. Terrain not as mapped, will cut across to rejoin path tomorrow. That was the last line before the handwriting began to shake. When she was rescued, her GPS tracker was off by nearly 7 miles from the intended route. In the interview later, she said, "I thought I'd recognize the landscape, but the ridge repeated itself, like I was walking the same slope from 3 different angles." She tried retracing her steps. She never found the trail again. 2. Never follow lights in the forest. By the 3rd night, her headlamp batteries were nearly dead. She rationed the light by flicking it on only when she heard movement. She said that around midnight, she started seeing faint white glows between the trees, like stars had dropped into the forest. She thought maybe it was the reflection from another hiker's camp or a ranger search team. But when she called out, the lights drifted farther away. Then, when she stopped calling, they stopped too. I knew then it wasn't a person, she said. It was waiting for me to notice it again. She turned her back and walked the other direction. The glow followed, dimming when she moved faster, brightening when she slowed. She finally crouched behind a boulder and stayed there until sunrise, covering her ears so she couldn't hear the low hum that came with the light. 3. Don't hike alone after dark. Claire hadn't meant to hike at night. But once she lost the trail, time stopped meaning what it used to. The forest doesn't tell you what hour it is, she said. You just keep walking until the dark feels different. By the 5th night, her phone battery was dead. Her compass needle jittered between north and nowhere. She said she started hearing voices then, not loud, just faint, conversational, as if two people were walking a few yards behind her. They never spoke to me, she said. They just talked to each other, saying things I almost recognized. My name sometimes, my dad's, the sound of my own voice. She decided not to turn around. I realized that's what it wanted, for me to acknowledge it. 4. Always tell someone your route. Claire had left her itinerary with a friend in Anchorage but didn't include the off-trail ridge she planned to photograph. Search and Rescue didn't know where to look until day 4, when they found a cairn she'd built with her initials scratched into one of the stones. The rescue coordinator, Ranger Dulka, said it was luck they even saw it. A beam of early sun hit the rock just right, reflecting off the scratched letters. If that light hadn't caught it, he said, we'd have never found her coordinates. When they tracked her by drone, they expected to find a campsite or debris. Instead, they found her sitting upright in the open, facing east, hands folded in her lap. She was whispering when they landed the chopper. They thought she was praying. When they got closer, they realized she was counting. 5. Carry your own sound. She didn't have a whistle. Her phone was dead. Her emergency beacon was still zipped inside her pack 2 miles away. All she had was her voice. She said she used to sing while hiking, quietly, under her breath, a way to feel less alone. But the longer she was lost, the more the forest seemed to learn her song. By the 5th day, I could hear it humming before I even started, she said. It was waiting for me to join in. That's when she stopped making sound altogether. If you stop talking, she said, the woods stop listening. She stayed silent for 30 hours. That silence saved her life. When rangers examined the area where she'd been found, they noted the ground was disturbed in a wide ring around her, about 10 feet in diameter. Like something had circled her camp repeatedly but never crossed into it. They never identified the tracks. Too shallow for a bear. Too uniform for a person. Ranger Dalka marked the site as Zone 0, unclassified anomaly, no further entry. Claire's story isn't about superstition. It's about what happens when you stop listening to the rules and start listening to the forest instead. Every one of the 5 rules she broke traces back to someone else who never came home. She just happened to stop one step short of joining them. The rules aren't there to limit freedom. They're there to remind you what freedom costs when you mistake it for invincibility. Because the wild doesn't care if you're careful. It only cares if you respect the silence. Here's what her case taught the rangers, and what it should teach you. Stay on marked trails. Trails aren't conveniences. They're corridors of safety mapped by those who survived before you. Never follow lights in the forest. Curiosity kills quicker than fear. If a light moves like it knows you're watching, it's not lost. It's leading. Don't hike alone after dark. Darkness changes the brain. It invites echoes, distortions, and voices you'll believe because you need to. Always tell someone your route. If no one knows where you are, you're already halfway gone. Carry your own sound. A whistle, a beacon, a signal that's yours alone. Something to cut through whatever's out there calling back. Later, when they interviewed Ranger Danka about the rescue, he said something the other rangers still repeat during briefings. The rules aren't there to limit you. They're there to keep the forest from learning your name. He looked out the window after saying it, watching fog roll through the treetops. And once it learns it, he added, it doesn't forget. In her recovery video, a short interview the Park Service used for training, Claire sits in front of a log cabin window, hands folded, a wool blanket draped over her shoulders. Her voice is calm, almost detached. I kept thinking the forest was punishing me, she says, but it wasn't. It was just listening. She looks down for a moment, eyes wet. Every sound wanted an answer, she says softly. I stopped giving them. The camera holds on her face as she looks back toward the window, where a line of dawn light is just beginning to spill through the trees. Cut to black. 5 stories. 5 mistakes. 5 reminders that the wild doesn't forgive shortcuts. Survival isn't luck. It's obedience to silence. Every rescue, every disappearance, every rule scribbled in the margins of a ranger's notebook is a small plea from the ones who didn't listen in time. Stay on the path. Don't chase the light. Keep your group, mark your route, and bring your own sound. Because when the forest calls, it's not asking for conversation. It's asking if you're ready to vanish,